It's kind of balanced. Right Club audience, are you ready? Timekeeper of time, are you ready? Am I ready? I'm ready. 3, 2, 1. This is called Twice. They had both killed someone. That is to say, each had killed his own man, so between them, they had ended 2 lives, accidentally, in anger. They were both ashamed of it, but they both used their shame to build themselves again as new men. Both had paid their debt to the state, and both genuinely thought of themselves as reformed. They hadn't seen each other in months. Frankie had made parole back in the fall, but Jim had to stick around until March to stand before the parole board. Both men had been active in the inmate reentry program, hoping to learn how to exist in the world again. In the program, they came to Christ. They learned to think about the damage they'd done and the ways they might eventually forgive themselves. Once Jim was free, he called his partner up. On the inside, they'd come up with plans to start working together. Frankie had some good experience as a brick mason, and Jim was smart enough to keep a wall plumbing level. He'd learn quick. Short, stout, red-bearded Frankie sat at a cafe table on the back patio of T-Birds. He had a 12-stepper's place setting, a well-worn brass Zippo, an ashtray full of unfiltered Pall Mall butts, and a cup of coffee which was drained and refilled, drained and refilled. He asked to be seated away from the nice little family so his smoking wouldn't bother the kids. He looked up from his coffee to see Jim hulking through the doorway, only patches of light visible over his shoulders as the beast of a man squeezed through. Jim set a notebook and a pen on the table and went to hug his friend. Frankie closed the lid of his tired old laptop and returned the embrace, grunting like an animal, squeezing hard and earnestly. He reopened the computer and showed Jim his QuickBooks from the past few months, then photos of several jobs he'd done. They decided to call the business the Master's Masonry Service. Frankie had been out working hard. He'd incorporated, gotten bonded, and licensed. The reentry program had helped refer him to a special small business loan for recommended ex-cons, and he was spending the money thoughtfully. They ordered gigantic bacon cheeseburger platters. Jim was not a coffee drinker, so he kept the waitress busy refilling his Mountain Dew. His eyes widened to see the hard work his partner had done, and he breathed deep and tried to allow himself to feel as though he might deserve this second chance. Their plates were cleared, and an empty ashtray arrived. They set about the work of filling it up again before the pie arrived. "You ain't had no trouble because of being a con?" Jim asked over the noise of loud bass coming out of a loud little custom Honda pulling into the parking lot. "Folks are willing to give us a chance. Word's getting around. I've been working pretty hard and charging a fair price. I'm done a day before I promised, and the work is good. We ain't had a lot of rain, so I've been turning it out, bro. All we need is for you to walk right in and help me grow." One of the hardest things to learn in the reentry program is that it's okay for men to be grateful and affectionate and kind to each other. Jim reached across the table and put a giant tattooed hand on his friend's shoulder. "Thanks, man. This means a lot to me. I want you to understand just how much." And in an instant, 2 young men came crashing through the swinging doors of the back patio, scattering swagger and obscenity as they picked out seats near the back. The nice little family took note of this and made preparations to leave. Jim left his hand on Frankie's shoulder throughout, refusing to alter his own course for the sake of the interruption that had just arrived. "This means a lot. You've done a lot to make a lot of things better for me, and I'll make it worth your trouble." "Faggots!" The one wild boy pretended to sneeze. The family gathered their children and decided to pay at the register rather than wait for a check. Frankie smiled tightly at his friend, acknowledging but moving beyond the taunt that would have otherwise raised him to his feet, which would have resulted in spilled blood 5 years ago. As if it hadn't happened, he leaned in closer to Jim. "Debbie called me the other day." "What? That's great. Are y'all..." "Yeah, we ain't nothing, not yet, but we're talking." The waitress came with more dew and coffee, another ashtray, cleared the empty pie plates. "Y'all need anything else?" "No, thanks. Be all right with you if me and my friend here talk another couple minutes?" Frankie spoke without flirtation or condescension, but with a simple kindness that Jim admired. "Take your time, hon. Here's a check, but that don't mean you can't get something else." "Hey, wide load, how about some service over here?" Jim stiffened and put a foot beneath his weight to head in that direction. The waitress saw this. "I can handle those two, they all bark." She left to tend to the insults and bluster across the patio. Occasional syllables of filth punctuated the songs of crickets and frogs in the almonds as the 2 ex-cons silently acknowledged what was happening, searching for answers. Frankie called the waitress back on her way in. "Are you sure you're okay with them too?" "Y'all go on and have your conversation inside. They're just trying to get a rise out of you. As soon as the big dogs are gone, they'll stop acting up." This rang true. Such is the way of dumb young stags. They picked up and left a 100% tip on a $30 tab and headed inside. "Where you old pussies going?" came a voice from way too close. Jim turned around to see Frankie's nostrils already flaring an inch away from the buck who had spoken, his shoulders loose, knuckles whitening. "We don't want no trouble," Frankie said, his hands now up, palms out, in the gesture that matched his words. "That's right you don't," the boy said, poking 3 fingers into Frankie's sternum. The other boy jumped at Jim, hoping to elicit a flinch. Jim didn't flinch a bit. Instead, he calmly noticed the red flush start up his friend's neck, washing over the cross tattoo that peeked out of the collar and ended behind his ear. It was there, behind the ear, that Jim punched Frankie, nice and hard. It's a good, clean knockout spot, and Frankie never saw it coming. Frankie, who had worked so hard to do the right thing, never had the chance to answer those colts and get into trouble. He never had the chance to ruin the life he built for himself so quickly. He could still talk to Debbie. He could keep his loans paid. He didn't have to make a second mistake. Jim knew Frankie and knew he was about to act in anger. Jim was cool and deadly rational. He made a simple decision. As Frankie fell, Jim kicked out the knee from under the boy closest to him, grabbed him by the ear and pulled hard to hurl himself closer to the other boy. He and Frankie had made mistakes once. And by God, if anybody was going to make a mistake twice, it was not going to be this man, his good friend. That's that.